Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door Net Admin. There is a lot of knowledge in IT. We all know this. But you're often asked to prove, how do you know this? How well do you know this? This is especially the case if you are going for a new job, for example. And so one of the ways that you can actually measure your knowledge as such and present proof of that to an employer is through certifications. Certifications spook an awful lot of people. A lot of them. Even the people that I work with are petrified of certifications. Um, I'm overgeneralizing a little bit. It's not that bad. Still, certifications. Where do you get them? What are they? What are good certifications to go to? What are some things to be looking for? I'm going to talk about that today, and maybe we'll get some answers for you. The first thing to note is that certifications are a lot of work, but it doesn't have to be super threatening. The biggest thing to do is to just do it. It's as simple as that. And I have a particular trick that works for me. I don't make promises that it'll work for anybody else. But for me, what helps is going and actually booking the exam before I even know the material. Because then I've got a reason to study it. I've got an exam coming up. And if emergencies come up in life, because that's a thing that happens, you are always allowed to reschedule or rebook your exam. And that's fine. But if I don't have a reason, a goalpost in front of me saying I have an exam coming up, I got to get my butt in gear, then it's never going to happen. And I've seen a lot of people go through, well, I guess I'll study the material, and when I feel like I'm, confident, then I'll book the exam. And it never happens. It could be 3, 4, 5, 6 years. They still don't feel confident enough. They haven't had the time to study. I get it. These things happen, especially if you've got a family, or if you've got other people that you're taking care of, or if you're working more than one job, or if you're, trying to do schooling and certification in addition to a full-time job. All of these things take up time. I get it. I honestly do. But in my experience, at least, if you don't set yourself a hard deadline and give yourself that motivation to, actually sit down, staple your pants to the chair and study, then it's not going to happen. Or it'll be a lot more difficult to make it happen. So that's a tip that I have right off the bat. So let's dive in and start taking a look at certifications. What are some common certifications that you can take, and how good are they? Some of the first certifications I always see people chasing down, for lack of a better word, are the CompTIA certifications. I actually have the website up right here. And I'm going to skip over this, fancy imagery and, looking at all of this stuff. I'm not interested in the marketing. I'm not interested in explaining why it's necessary. Let's take it as a given that you need something to show that you have an amount of knowledge. Okay, so certifications, what do they have available? There's a whole bunch of them here. I've pulled up 4 just to kind of get an idea of what they look at. A plus is, I think, probably the granddaddy of all that CompTIA has. I'm also going to be looking at Network Plus for networking specific stuff. Security Plus is another that I see for people wanting to get into cybersecurity. And then there's the all-around general Tech Plus. Is that useful? Who knows? There's others that you could do. For example, there's Linux Plus, there's Server Plus. You'll notice there's no Windows Plus. I guess everybody thinks that that's too basic to need a certification. That, or they're fearful of stepping on Microsoft's toes, because we're going to get to that in a minute. Data Plus, Cloud Plus, there's lots of options. But let's take a look at the first four that I said I'd highlight and see what those have to offer. If we go to A plus right off the bat and we scroll down here to what skills will you learn? Okay, what are we expecting to get out of this? Hardware, okay, hardware components and devices. Networking, types of networks, all right, yeah, all right. Mobile devices, all right. Operating systems, mostly Windows OS, I imagine. But then they also throw in Mac OS, Chrome OS, Android, Linux OS at the very bottom. Okay. Troubleshooting, virtualization, cloud computing, software troubleshooting, security, operational procedures. Okay, this all sounds relatively comprehensive, doesn't it? I don't honestly have a lot of respect for most of the CompTIA certifications, and I'll tell you why. They're very generic. They're useful. If you have never touched any sort of IT job in your life, this might get you in the door because it shows that you have at least some knowledge of what you're touching. And cool. I'll go with that. But if you have had any sort of IT job or IT schooling, if this is all you have to show me, then I'm not terribly impressed, if I'm being honest. And I realize I'm a network admin. My standards might be a lot higher than for most people, but it is useful. I want to make that clear. It has its place. Let's take a look at some of the others. Network Plus, how useful is this? A lot less on the screen, but okay. Maybe we're just diving deeper into networks. Networking concepts, the OSI model. Hey, I've talked about that. Network appliances, applications, cloud concepts. Okay. Network security concepts. Okay. Network implementations, routing technologies. I've talked a little bit about how routers decide where to send traffic. That's in there, I'm sure of it. Switching technologies, wireless, troubleshooting methodology. Common issues related to networking, including cable, connectivity, and software problems. Here's where I start going. If you need a course to teach you how to troubleshoot a cable problem, then I'm not sure how terribly useful that is. Most of your cable troubleshooting is pretty simple. Substitute another cable that works. Okay, does your problem go away? Okay, then you've got a bad cable. Nah. Again, this has its place, and I'm being intentionally a little flippant, I realize. Um, it has its purpose, but it's very much on what I consider the basic end of things. Let's move on to Security Plus. We've got security concepts. Okay, that's good. It helps to know what you're talking about. Applying and enhancing security, vulnerability, management techniques. Okay, useful. Threats, vulnerabilities, mitigation. Focus on responding to common threats, cyber attacks, vulnerabilities. Okay, this is all good. Security program management and oversight. Okay, this seems more managerial, but probably useful to know anyway. Security architecture. Okay. Again, all of this I consider very foundational, very basic. It's not bad, but this is very much a general, basic, foundational overview. It's not something that I would say that you should rely upon as you're working to grow your career. If you've been in IT for 5 or 6 years, this is not where I want to see you starting out. If you've been working in IT for 5 or 6 years, I expect you to have already picked up this knowledge. And so trying to certify on it, I'm wondering why you aren't pushing yourself to do something more. But if you're just starting out, it's your first year and you want to, broaden your horizons and learn more about what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, then maybe this is where you start. So it has its place. Again, you just need to be careful about relying overly much on entry-level certifications. The last one I have here from CompTIA is Tech Plus. What skills will you learn? IT concepts and terminology, software development, infrastructure, database fundamentals, applications and software, security. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. But we're talking about concepts and technology, programming language categories, interpret logic, understand the purpose of the concepts, common peripheral devices, okay, secure a basic wireless network, database concepts, structures, purpose, understand components of an operating system, okay, best practice methods, etc. These are very much basic levels. And the reason that I highlighted this is because this is perhaps one of their more basic one. It's a cornerstone for those venturing into tech-related careers. It's foundational tech knowledge. Okay, it lays the foundation for that. All right. Who benefits from this? Again, solid foundation. Tech adjacent workers, you don't have a job in tech, but you're working with tech a lot, you can gain some additional knowledge. Okay, so that's what this is intended for. It's important to look at not just the skills that you're trying to pick up, but who it's intended for, because Tech Plus sounds like it's got a really good breadth of stuff that it covers, and it does, but it's doing so to provide a foundation for other things moving forward. Okay, so like I said, this is something that if you're coming for your very first job in IT, this is respectable. Any of these CompTIA plus certifications will at least get me to say, okay, so you've started your journey. That's good. But if you've been working in IT 5 or 6, 7 years, yeah, I want to see something more. Okay, so what are some of the things that you can do along the seeing more route? The next thing I'm going to look at is Microsoft certifications, and there's a ton of them because Microsoft has a lot of stuff out there. We're just looking at credentials right now, broadly speaking, certification. There's 75 of these things. How do you even? First you go, okay, I got to take a couple of deep breaths. All right. So then you start looking for what it is you're trying to do. They have filters here: Azure, Microsoft 365, Office, Windows, and Windows Server. Important to note that Windows on its own is typically going to refer to your client operating systems. So Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 12, whenever that happens to roll around. Whereas Windows Server is very much on the server side of things. And they have all their other stuff here as well. Roles, if you've got a particular role in mind, you can look for that. But take a look at how they've notated some of these. You'll see a bunch of these have stars on the bottom of the shield. Those with 3 stars, those are expert level certifications. Let's open one and take a look at it. Yeah, expert, 3 stars. This is something that you're expected to have some pretty good know-how already. And in fact, there are prerequisites for this. You have to have one of these. You have to take your exam, and then Microsoft at least allows you to renew it online for free every year. So that's a good thing. If you have 2 stars, that's an associate level. That's your intermediate range. Oh, wow, that one's a lot smaller. Okay, but it is an intermediate certification. So it's good to have, but it's not expert level, and that's perfectly acceptable. If I'm honest, I expect most people to have associate level certifications, intermediate. There's nothing saying that you have to go on and push yourself to become an expert in any one thing or even everything. If you want to, I think that's really cool. But associate level stuff is perfectly acceptable. It means that you've got a solid working level knowledge of what you're doing with on a day-to-day basis, and you don't need a heck of a lot of help. Maybe some. We all need help from time to time, even the experts. But most, you can get through things for the most part. Then you have some fundamentals level stuff, and that has a single star. Again, this is your beginner level, or what I would call entry level. It's a good starting point if that's where, if you've never done anything before, that's a good place to start out. But don't try to spend a lot of time on those, because it's mainly there to help you get your foot in the door. If you've never done it before, if you've been doing it for a while, we probably want to look at associate or expert level or higher, but definitely the associate level. There's a lot of Microsoft certifications. Try not to get too hung up on them. Focus on the stuff that you're interested in or the stuff that you need for your job. I honestly would not have gotten any Microsoft certifications if it wasn't something that my employer, who happens to be a Microsoft partner, my employer needs people to have a certain number of specific certifications in order to stay on good terms with Microsoft. So we know that we need to have people taking some of these courses and actually certifying on them. So what we as a company want to do influences very heavily my choice of what certifications I'm going to go for. Every now and then I'll see something and I'll go, that looks interesting. I'm going to take that because I want to. And that's also an excellent thing to do. But, I also work cooperatively with my employer. Okay, what do you need? You need people with this knowledge? I'll go get it. If you need people with this knowledge, I can go get that too. And we work together on this. And, a good employer will also make it worth your while to do so. That's as much as I'll say about that. But if you want to go for Microsoft Teams, they have a Teams Administrator certification specifically. If you want to go for Azure AI, they've got that. If you want to go for just Azure Administrator, Azure Data, Azure Network Engineer, Azure Virtual Desktop, and this being a specialty, it says it's an intermediate level course, but it has no stars because it's a specialty rather than a general area that they're working on. But it is an intermediate level course. So don't let the stars be the only thing you look at to tell you the difficulty of a course. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but try to focus on the area that is most useful to you or most in demand at your desired job. And that will get you further along the way. What are some other certifications? Cisco. I would be incredibly remiss if I did not cover this, because in the world of networking, and I am a net admin, Cisco has some of the oldest certification programs around. They are always changing. They're always adapting because the world is always adapting as well. And I want to be very clear about this. Cisco and other network vendors are really, really, really bad about teaching you a bunch of stuff that is only for their proprietary equipment. They'll say, you have this, Cisco system, or if you're using Fortinet, you have this Fortinet system, and tell us how to use all of our proprietary technology to do a job. Okay? To some extent, you have to know some of this stuff so that you can pass your certification and move on. But to me, at least, That's not the most important part about it. The most important part is understanding the fundamentals of the area that you're working in. If you're in a Microsoft course, they might ask you, here's all of these, technologies we've built into Windows. What does the job? It's important to know what specific Microsoft products will do the job, because you have to know that to pass the certification. But it's more important to understand the principles of how you move data around, how you package up an operating system into an installation image. Again, something that I've talked about in the past. And how you move on with that. In networking, it's how do switches work? How did hubs work and repeaters work? I've talked about that too. How do routers function? How are the, various protocols going to work together? In what order does a router process the tasks ahead of it? Like, does it decide where to send the packet and then do network address translation? And then where does the firewall happen? Before or after the network address is translated? Does it happen in different places depending on whether the packet is going out of the router or coming into the router? There are a lot of these fundamental principles that if you learn how to think about them and learn how to break it down and visualize it in your head, you can take that knowledge to any network you work on, whether it uses Cisco, whether it uses Juniper, whether it uses Netgear, whether it uses Meraki, whether it uses anything else. So the most important part is the knowledge that you will gain that is not about the vendor. But I do want to say it right up front. It is a Cisco course, and therefore it is going to have a pile of Cisco proprietary stuff in there. And my suggestion is learn what you have to pass the certification, and then don't worry about that anymore. If you need to know something Cisco specific, you can look it up again later. The fundamentals are what's going to keep you going. So look at all these categories. Collaboration, okay, meh. But you can also see that you've got professional and expert level certifications. There's nothing entry in here. Cyber ops, you do have an entry level certification as well as associate and professional. Okay. Data center, professional and expert. And it continues largely in this vein. Design, there's only an expert level certification. That's it. I'm going to focus on enterprise because that's where we see the most certifications is in this category, because this has the original Cisco certifications in it. CCIE, Cisco Certified Internetworking Expert. This is the original network certification. It's hard. It is ridiculously hard. Last I heard, and admittedly this was some time ago, but it's something on the level of there being both a written and a practical exam. The written exam is a large amount of money. The practical exam is an even larger amount of money, and there's only a few places in the world where you can go to actually sit in a lab, and it is hours long, where you need to actually put your knowledge to the practical test and do what you are instructed to do on the equipment, and they'll rate how well you did that, how quickly you did that, how effectively you did that. CCIE intimidates me, okay? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking expert. I'm not there, and I know I'm not. But they also have CCNP, which is the professional level, and they have CCNA, which is entry level. And I want to focus on this entry level part. Whereas with Microsoft, your associate level certifications are intermediate. With Cisco, they are entry level. And this is where I would say, if you've been doing networking, something networking specific, for 5 or 6 years, this is what I want to see you working on. If you're, one of my technicians, work on your CCNA. I'm not as worried about a support technician because, support technician, validate your skill and knowledge of entry-level networking concepts and topics. Okay. That's if you have 1 year of experience, okay, fine. If you have 5 or 6 years, this is what I want you to see. I want to see you demonstrating skills and knowledge in a broad range of fundamentals so that you can actually take that and move forward with it. If you've got 10 or 15 years, I want to see Cisco certified network professional. I want to see you stepping it up a level. I have had people, say, "Oh, I've been working on this for, 25 years. I got my CCNA." Oh, honey, if you've been working in this job for 25 years and all you've got is an entry-level certification, do us all a favor and put it away. You're embarrassing me waving that around, okay? It's entry level. It's good. The other key point with the Cisco certifications and the Microsoft certifications, I hinted at this earlier, is that you have to recertify. If you got CCNA 12 years ago, but you never renewed it, it only lasted for 3 years. You don't have it anymore. And so if you tell me that you got it once, okay, but you don't have it now, you haven't stayed current, because they're going to retest you on your knowledge every time you recertify to make sure that your knowledge is current. So these are not one and done. I don't know if the CompTIA ones are, I've never checked. But the Microsoft and the Cisco ones are not one and done. You have to keep them current or you lose them. And it's not terribly impressive to go, I had this, 15 years ago. And if you have something from 15 years ago, here's another tip. Don't bother putting it on your resume. Nobody wants to see on my resume that I certified at the expert level on Microsoft Windows Server 2008. That impresses nobody. And in fact, it makes me look worse if I put that on my resume. Because, okay, so I certified on 2008 and then did what? Stopped paying attention? That doesn't fill anybody with confidence that I can handle what we have to handle here and now today. So if it's current, yes, by all means, list it. If it's in the past, maybe not so much. And keep advancing. That's something that we all want to see, is that you keep advancing. You don't just stay static at a single level. I'm not saying you have to do it all at once. I'm not saying you have to be an expert within 3 years. That's ridiculous. But keep advancing. Show us that you're, continuing to learn and grow. That's a good thing. And that makes you look even better. That makes you even more valuable as an employee. So that's a tip. Last thing I'm going to show you really quick, because I've been talking a long time. You can also have national or organizational level certifications. This one is for Canada. This is Canada's Association of Information Technology Professionals, or CIPS. It's our only national recognition for IT professionals. Think of this similar to an engineer's professional engineer designation, where you've actually joined an association, you're recognized as a professional engineer. Engineers all have their ring that they get as being a professional engineer. This is something similar. And so for this, they actually have 3 different rankings. I'm going to skip to the bottom first, because this is the Associate Information Technology Professional or Candidate. This is for people who have recently completed college or university, but don't have the experience yet. And that is something that will depend very much on which school or course you're going through. So it may or may not be open to you. What you have instead, if you have the experience, is your information systems professional, which is a legally recognized designation in Canada for IT professionals. Or if you're a senior level or more advanced level, you can get information technology certified professional. Again, also legally recognized in Canada. And it's the process of certifying this is a little more onerous. I will tell you straight up front, I don't have any of these yet. It is my goal. I want to certify on ITCP because I have the required experience and the required knowledge to do it, but I haven't done it yet. So it's a completely different process because this actually wants to know about what you're doing in your job. They wants to talk to your employer and get your employer's perspective on how you're doing your job, because this is checking to see that you have the whole breadth of knowledge and are putting it into practice. So it's very different from one of these more academic certifications where you learn the material, you take an exam, and you move on and you recertify every now and then. This certification is all about, are you putting it to the practice? Are you putting it into practice? And you do need to recertify it on it, same as you do anything else. But that can also be something that you can put on there and looks pretty good on a resume if you ever decide to go for that. So there's a few thoughts on various certifications that you can have, how impressive they are, how impressive they might not be, where you want to go for them, where you might say that's something that isn't really relevant to me at this point and I'm going to move on to something else. There's lots of choices out there. And hopefully, I have helped you learn a little bit more about them. And hopefully, it was relatively interesting along the way. But if you have any other questions, if you have any feedback or thoughts on things you would like me to cover in future, let me know down in the comments section. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door net admin, and we will see you next time.